Sometimes people give me grief when I start these videos and I say really looking forward to or really excited about, but this is one of those fights that I am actually really looking forward to. We have Azaitar taking on, Gatineau, Quebec, Canada's Marc-Andre Barriault. And Matt, for Barriault, it's weird, right? I mean, his last fight, he took on Oscar Piata and he absolutely beat the wheels off of Piata. And listen, you got to give a little bit of backstory on that, because for Oscar Piata, he came into the UFC, he was a Cage Warriors champion. The sky was the limit for Oscar Piata. And that guy absolutely burned out. Like, he was gone in just a minute.
He flew too close to the sun, some might say.
Everybody that fought Oscar Piata, you got to worry about his grappling. And he's a decent striker, but Marc-Andre Barriault just absolutely... listen, a few guys that already ruined the hype, but Barriault really just stamped it. And I went full English on his name there. But for Barriault, I mean, what do we know out of him? It's pressure, and more pressure. And we talk about that in a lot of these fights. Like, you know, a guy that's fighting is like an offensive lineman. You just got to completely just obliterate your opponent. But for Powerbar, that's exactly what he does. He always puts a pace on his opponent. He's trying to grind you up against the cage, getting that head placement, working the takedowns, trying to throw you. If you want a perfect example of a good Barriault fight, he was a former TKO middleweight and light heavyweight champ. And again, the fight that you want to see is a fight against Fredericton, New Brunswick's own Adam Hunter. And I'm not talking about, the comedian here. I'm talking about the man, the myth, the legend that was supposed to be in the UFC at one point, and he had some USADA issues, just like both of these guys. For Barriault, he goes into that fight. It's an absolute slobber knocker for around, and he just completely beats the wheels off Adam Hunter. So he comes into the UFC, loses to Andrew Sanchez. It's going to happen. Loses to Krzysztof Jotko. Close enough fight. It was a split decision loss.
One of the worst fights of all time, I have to say.
Jotko beats him, and then he goes out there and fights Junyoung Park. And when you fight the Iron Turtle, sometimes you're going to lose. So for Barriault, 3-fight losing streak, obliterates Piata, and then he has a positive USADA test. And it's for Osterin. It was back in the summer. Then it was retroactive, and things moved around. I think it was, December when it was announced. And for Barriault, he was upfront and honest about it. Listen, it was a tainted supplement, this and that. And that seems to be the consensus. So he had a long layoff. His last fight was back in June of 2020. And we get to see him back. For Azaitar, yikes. There's been a lot of issues. And it's not just issues with the law. It's not just a hard time getting a visa, which he got for this one. And listen, you want to read about that one. Bloody Elbows got you covered. But for Azaitar, he also had a lengthy USADA suspension. And for him, I got to get it right. It was, it was a suspension for tamoxifen. It was prescribed by a doctor, 7-month suspension retroactive to August 25th when it was announced. So February 1st, 2021, they put it out there. The weirdest thing about it, this is all as his brother Otman Azaitar is trying to get the bag. And not like, hey, let's go get the bag. It's like, hey, let's get the bag of potatoes. But they weren't potatoes.
They weren't.
So those crazy Azaitar brothers, they've done some wild and wonky things in their life. And I'm honestly... I tried to make light of it. You shouldn't make light of it. Like, these guys have done some sketchy stuff. All that to say, when they fight, both brothers are exciting. For Azaitar, doesn't necessarily fight like Otman, though, because we see a lot of pressure kicks. We see a lot of volume out of him, too. The one thing that I like out of Azaitar, he blitzes forward. It's just he's not 100% accurate. He usually uses it to set up a big power shot at the end. But when he goes in there and charges, a lot of them are going to hit the forearms of his opponents when they shell up. But he usually ends it. He'll rip to the body, which I love to see. The nice left hook to the body. There's nothing that warms my heart more than that. Azaitar, perfect fighter that really tries to pick away at the body so he can get at the head as the fight goes on. I actually love this fight stylistically. This should be an awesome one.
I am really excited for this fight. And for Marc-Andre Barriault, he has not had a very good run in the UFC. Let's just call it what it is. He was 0-3. And I know we like to talk, this guy lost 3 fights and then the UFC gave them the papers. Normally they fight like 2 guys in the top 15. Then they'll fight someone who's unranked and then they might get cut. Barriault never even fought someone who was ranked, and it's a little concerning for me because I know how good he looked in that Piata fight, and we were both like, wow, he might have finally made his turn. Like, this might be the fighter that we were once promised coming out of TKO. But it's not like he's the first guy to beat Oscar Piata, and it's not even like he's the first guy to finish him impressively. We've seen that time and time again, and for...
Gerald Meerschaert did it.
Exactly. That tells you all you need to know. Now, I will tell you this, just because his name popped up on the screen. I was very excited when Azaitar was supposed to fight Sayer Bahadurizada, because I'm a big Bahadurizada fan. He just throws a lot of power and leaves his head very exposed. Always a fun fight for that man. I have the number here. Marc-Andre Barriault had 197 picograms of Austrian in his body. So if John Jones watches our videos, maybe he can tell us how many pinches of salt that is in a swimming pool. But it was a very small number, though, and it was from a tainted supplement, and he was cleared of all wrongdoing. So it's not like he has a real USADA suspension coming into this fight. I just am worried from the fighter that we've seen throughout his UFC debut, because I've got a couple numbers here. I did a little digging, and if you get rid of the Oscar Pereira fight and just look at his striking differential through the rest of his UFC career, he actually has a negative striking differential, and it's almost up to 1 strike a minute for how negative he is. And I know when you look at that Pereira fight, he does look really good, but I bring up how bad the Jocko fight was because I think it's a good example of what you brought up. Marc-Andre Barriault does move forward, and he does all those things that we kind of know his fighting style to be good with. A lot of forward pressure, he does try to pressure with the hands, go for a few takedowns, but when he fights even a decent striker, he can get out volumed, and Kais can cut angles on him. He's not good at cutting the cage off. He will just kind of follow his opponent around in a circle. So if you are someone who has really good footwork, and again, it's not like a lot of guys in this division have the footwork of a Krzysztof Jotko. He's a guy who has been ranked before. He's one of those borderline kind of top 20 to 15 guys on really any given day. But he was really able to use his movement to frustrate Barriault as that fight went on. And for Azaitar, I don't think he's going to go into this fight fighting like Jotko. I think he can throw some of the same techniques that Jotko can. He's not going to go out there throwing like 9 spinning back kicks in a row, but he will switch it up with his kicks, and I think that's important because for Barriault, who does carry his hands a little high, and you had mentioned it, brings this up, those body attacks are going to be there all day long. And for Barriault, I kind of compare him to an Ian Heinisch, where he doesn't really fight at this great pace and then he gets tired. He fights at a pace that's like a 4 out of 10 for the whole entire fight. He's not going to fall off any cliff, but it's not like he starts this fight with a full gas tank and he's going to go in there. He just kind of stays the same, and that does worry me. If he was a guy who could come in, have a big storm early, he might be able to get Azaitar out of there. But I do think as this fight goes on, it just keeps on favoring Azaitar. He has the body attacks. I think he's a more tactical striker on the feet. And you brought up with his combination something Dan Hardy talks about a lot, that he had trained, he was just doing Muay Thai, where it's you want to throw a combination, but you always want to change which punch in the combination is the power shot. And for Azaitar, he's really good at doing that, and he can do it with his hands and his kicks. And like you had mentioned, he'll throw techniques just to throw sometimes, where they do look like they're landing on the arms, but I honestly don't think he's throwing those with full power. I do think he's a smart enough of a striker where he'll throw just to get you to cover up and open up some holes for him, and then he can expose some of your weaknesses. So I know Marc-Andre Barriault is a bit of a favorite, and I know you'll talk about the odds in a bit. I'm really surprised by that, honestly.
I went back, and again, you watch all these Azaitar fights, and you have to mention it. I mean, his last fight was back in July of 2018. He's been on the shelf for a long time. So, Azaitar could be absolutely spent, or he could have somehow learned later on in his career, which is really weird because he's coming into this one. He's 35 already. He's no spring chicken. But you look at some of the wins that he has on his record. I mean, Piotr Struce was a drawback with KSW. Struce is a really good fighter that maybe you haven't heard of, but he's been around the block for a long time. Also had a knockout win over Jack Marshman back in 2014, which again, you might not like the Welsh paratrooper, but he was around in the UFC for quite some time while still being a paratrooper and getting in trouble for still fighting. But if you look at his UFC debut, he took on Vitor Miranda. What's Vitor Miranda good at?
Being old.
Technically, everything. He was what? He was good in Savate. He was good in Muay Thai. He was good in Jiu-Jitsu. Like, Vitor Miranda, the best fighter that never was. But Miranda was old in that fight. He was what, 39 in that fight? So Miranda kind of slowed down a little bit. The one thing that I did like out of Azaitar in that fight that I would like against a guy like Barriault, if Barriault pressures and he gets Azaitar down, Azaitar did against Vitor Miranda what Derek Lewis does in every fight. I'm just getting the F up, and I'm using all my strength. Azaitar's not a big guy for the weight class. I mean, he's only, 5'8"? Like, he's a short guy for this division, but he will just power himself back up. So if he has any of that explosiveness left in his body, I think he should be able to use it to his advantage.
No, I agree. And another just kind of short segment from that Miranda fight, he does jump for an armbar on Miranda, and it is really tight. I'm not saying he's going to go out there and submit Marc-Andre Barriault, but I do think that that is a facet of Azaitar's game that doesn't get talked about enough. He is really good on the ground, and he can submit you in a plethora of different ways. And Miranda, yeah, he is kind of good at everything, but he is mainly known for his wrestling and jiu-jitsu. And for you to go out there and not... I understand he got taken down in that fight a few times, but for Azaitar, like you mentioned, he's either getting back up to his feet or he's just going to out-scramble you and end up on top anyway. So I really do like Azaitar in this fight.
So if we look at the odds, and this is always fun, Azaitar open to minus 135 favorite or thereabouts. He's now plus 101 For Barriault, open at plus 135. He's now minus 124. Money's coming in on Barriault. 1,125 total votes on Tapology. 85% Azaitar, 71% by decision. I had Azaitar before I even looked at the Tapology picks, and I'm so surprised that the odds are skewed to Canada's way. And for Germany and Morocco, the fans have Azaitar.
Unless Yanni the Greek knows something I don't, and he put a bunch of money on Marc-Andre Barriault, I do like Azaitar in this fight. I just think he does everything a little bit better. I don't think cardio is going to be an issue for him. I think he's the better striker. It might be, but it's not like Barriault's some guy who can go out there and he's some cardio king that can really put it on you. If he is able to get some of those clinch positions, he can tire you out. But if it is a back and forth fight, I do think Azaitar has equal cardio to Barriault, so I think this will be a very fun fight, but I do think Abu Azaitar is going to win.
Tamoxifen versus Osterin. We'll see who wins out. We're both going with Abu Azaitar to get the win. Really looking forward to this card. Heavyweight title fight. At the top, you have Stipe Miocic taking on Francis Ngannou. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt. As we always say, let's get into it.